Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus, a weekly program that takes a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. June is a busy time for the Inland Revenue Department, as there are quite a number of taxes that are due, from the renewal of business and occupation license and excise tax to unincorporated business tax and the insurance registration fees. Today we are shining the spotlight on property tax, which affects every property owner and plays a vital role in national development. How does the property tax system work? How are properties valued, and can an individual appeal the value set on his or her property? Well, joining us today with the answers are Eliza Mills, who is the Assistant Controller at the Inland Revenue Department, and we also have Mr. Norvin Rollins, who is the Chief Valuation Officer. Stay with us for InFocus for a discussion on a stronger tomorrow through fair taxation.
What if your child's journey to wealth could begin with a single step? Through Aspire, every young citizen aged 5 to 18 receives $1,000 EC dollars, half in savings, half invested in their future. Financial education for life. Sign up today. Give your child a future of financial freedom. Don't wait for wealth to knock. Create it with Aspire.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Thanks for staying with us, and allow me now to welcome back to InFocus Ms. Eliza Mills, who, as I mentioned, is the Assistant Controller of Inland Revenue. Welcome, Ms. Mills.
It's a pleasure being here.
And we have a first-time guest with us, Mr. Norvin Rollins. Welcome, sir. You are the Chief Valuation Officer. Welcome to you.
I'm elated to be here, yes.
Right. Ms. Mills, let's start off with a basic question, but I'm not sure how many persons know the answer to this. The role of the Inland Revenue Department. Some people may feel it's just to collect money. Is that a fair assessment?
Our role goes a little bit beyond just the collection of money. And I think our mission statement captures it best. And so I'm craving with your audience to allow me to read it just for emphasis. It says, Inland Revenue is to administer the tax laws in a fair and efficient and equitable manner, to promote voluntary compliance, to maximize revenue for collection for the development of the Federation in a manner that warrants the highest degree of public confidence in our professionalism and integrity. So from an Inland Revenue standpoint, we are to collect taxes. That's what most persons know that we do. Mm-hmm. We are to do so in a fair and equitable manner. We are to educate and inform the public so that doing so will encourage individuals to comply voluntarily. And when we serve, it is our intention or aim to serve with professionalism and integrity.
I think those two words, fair and equitable, are two words that really jump out of me based on that mission. That the public confidence must really be rooted in inland revenue in terms that it's doing its job, and it does it without fear, without favor, without showing anyone any sort of bias or any preferential treatment. That's very important in what you do.
That's right. And so at the core of our what we do, we uphold the law. That is the rule of thumb that governs the operations at the Inland Revenue Department. And you can hold us and what we do and use the law as a benchmark to ensure that Inland Revenue in turn fulfills its responsibilities to the taxpaying public.
And I would imagine, of course, that a part of that obligation would be confidentiality. You deal with numbers, you deal with reporting for companies and individuals as well. So that's not something that persons would necessarily want out there in the public. So confidentiality, I'm sure, is an important part there.
It is an important part. Every officer who is employed at the Inland Revenue Department takes an oath of secrecy. And so we are governed, we are requested, we are required to hold the trust of the public. So therefore, you should not find Inland Revenue, any of our employees divulging any information as it relates to our staff or the clients that we serve.
Now, Inland Revenue is a federal department. How does it function in Nevis?
Inland Revenue, it is a federal department, and Inland Revenue and St. Kitts, we work closely together. We collaborate on mutual projects, but Nevis themselves, they too are governed by the same laws that we are.
So is there some sort of a separation? Is it basically like Social Security where there's essentially a branch here in St. Kitts and a branch in Nevis? The monies that are collected in Nevis, how are they dispersed? How does that work by Inland Revenue in Nevis?
From our perspective, there are two revenue agencies. There's one Inland Revenue, one office operating in St. Kitts, the other operates out of Nevis. And the monies are directed to the NIA and as well as the Treasury here in St. Kitts.
Okay, so the money is collected.
Finance.
The money is collected in Nevis. They're used by the NIA. That's what you're saying, essentially.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So tell us then a bit about taxes itself now, because of course, as I mentioned at the top, there are a number of taxes that became due this month, and that would be June 15. But I have to say, I got an email reminding me a lot of that. Some persons may wonder why they're getting an email about corporation taxes if they don't have a business. But I suppose it's just a general email, and we'll speak a bit more to that. But I want to focus particularly on the property tax, because the other taxes that I mentioned, there was a deadline of June 15th, and we can talk about those a bit later since they've already gone. But the more important one is property tax. It's due at the end of the month, I gather. Tell us about this tax and how it is assessed.
Now, property tax is a tax levied on land, building, or on the improvement on the land. Now, how is it assessed? It's assessed through market value, the market value approach, what we call the replacement cost approach, which I will explain a little bit further down. What we do, we calculate the market value of the land, and if there's a building on it, we also calculate the market value of that building, and we apply a tax, applicable tax rate depending on the use or the classification of the property. That's how we derive the tax for property tax purposes.
You mentioned improvements on the land. What does that mean? If I strike oil?
Building, building or building-like. Those are what I refer to as improvement. You might have a paved way. These are things that affect a driveway. These things affect value of a garage. You might have an additional building on the lot and sale. So those improve or increase your value and potentially your property tax that is paid.
Can it be decreased?
Yes, it can be decreased. Of course, if you demolish the property, that leads to a reduction in the price of the property. And there are other external factors that could lead to a reduction of the property tax.
What about environmental factors? Say it's discovered that the land may become swampy. Would those things be taken into account?
Yes, they are. If you have, as you said, land that is swampy, or you're living right next to a landfill, those are taken into consideration when calculating the value and also the property tax.
Okay. And how often is property tax paid?
Property taxes is due and payable on June the 30th each year. And I say that because basically you can come in between those time and make as many payments as you want to. Because let's say my taxes is $1,000. I may not have all that money one time. So I could come in and make a payment arrangement and basically pay it off by June the 30th. So basically, if your tax is $30, you may just want to come to the office once and pay. So it's a one-time payment, but you're allowed to come in as often as you can to ensure that by June the 30th, your taxes are up to date.
I want to come back to that, but specifically, I want to ask, as we continue, the role of the property valuation unit, because of course, we just spoke a bit about some of the factors that will determine whether or what cost is ascribed to whatever property, whether it be building or just land or whatever. So the role of the property valuation unit within Inland Revenue, tell us a bit about that.
Well, the role of the property valuation unit is administering and assessing property market value for the purpose of taxation. Now, there are other roles that we're responsible for, including ensuring that the tax is administered in a fair and equitable manner, ensuring that each property is assigned a valuation class, be it residential, commercial, accommodation, agricultural, and to ensure that basically that we publish all properties. A valuation list is published or made public of all the properties that are valued, and basically the classification of those properties. So we're into transparency. We're into showing you basically what your property is valued, and you can compare that to your neighbor's property to see if you're being assessed fairly and equitably.
I wasn't aware of this. Where is this list published?
Well, we have sought to publish this list, but it's a mandate of the law. However, due to concerns of the general public, we only have that list available in the office, or you can come to the office and ask John's property, how much is it valued for? Because you know that you and John's property are comparable, you know, in size and condition and all that. So you can get that information from the office, and we decided not to post it because of the public's fear that criminal activity may take place if people learn of the value of their property.
And that in itself, I think it can lead itself, it opens up itself to mischief. And with such information, there are some persons who may seek to have that information and use it not in a way that it could be reflecting positively on someone, as opposed to creating mischief in the neighborhood. Have there been cases of such reported?
Well, we have no case of that. I think most people ask about value because they're making a comparison to their neighbor's property, you know, and they want to what they want to do is to basically know that they're being treated fairly and equitably when it comes to the administering of the tax.
Okay. And so in terms of how many persons now are in this property valuation unit at Inland Revenue?
Well, we currently have 5 persons working, including myself, and we basically have a field officer and cartography staff that deals with collecting the information from outside, inspecting, measuring, taking pictures of property, and then we have the data entry staff that basically inputs the data into the system to calculate the value and also the tax payable.
Can those persons be easily identified, those doing the survey? Because, of course, we are mindful that there are some persons out there who, again, may use the information for malicious purposes to survey a person's property to see where the weak points are, maybe the intent on breaking or entering or stuff like that. So the staff, can they be easily identified? Does the public have a right to ask them, who are you and what are you doing?
Yes, as a matter of fact, each employee of the department has a ID, and we ask the staff to basically show your ID to the taxpayer, such that you're easily identified and they know you're from the Inland Revenue Department.
And they can't refuse to show that ID?
No, they can't.
So if someone does refuse, then they're likely something suspicious happening?
Correct.
Right. In which case they should probably consult the authorities. In terms of the training, what type of training would an officer have to go through? Because of course there's so many factors that you mentioned that goes into the pricing of properties. What type of training would one have to go through?
Well, first of all, we are expected to have training in property valuation, the techniques used to value property, as well as we're asking the staff to have training in AutoCAD or architecture, because we use AutoCAD to sketch the footprint of the building and calculate its area. So we're asking that those two skills be available, and so those are things that we look at.
Now, I came across a graphic on your department's website, it's sknird.com, and it says, pay your property tax, build a stronger tomorrow. Can you speak to the message being communicated behind this theme?
Of course. First of all, based on the legal obligation, we want to remind persons, of course, of the deadline to pay their taxes. And so we're saying, pay your taxes on or before June 30th of this year. And as we also want all residents, property owners, citizens who has property in St. Kitts to look at their property not just as a legal obligation, but an investment in our federation. Because every bit of property tax that is paid contributes to our national development. Every dollar that is paid is an investment for now, but secures opportunities for our children and our children's children.
Mm-hmm. Give us a sense of how that is done.
And so what happens is that once property tax is collected, it adds to the revenue. And that revenue goes and is used for the construction of roads, in the securing of renewable energy infrastructure, and the list goes on. So we have housing initiatives, we have ICT projects, there are environment protection initiatives. All these help to ensure that St. Kitts not only takes care of its needs now, but the revenue comes in and secure position St. Kitts as a premier destination, one who takes care of the needs of its populace now, as well as look forward to building its capacity and its ability to take care of its citizens in the future.
Okay, Mr. Rollins, let me come back to you now, because you spoke quite a bit in terms of the work that the staff members have to do. How is the value of a property determined, and what formula is used to determine the appropriate tax amount? You cited a figure of $1,000, but how would one arrive at that figure?
Now, first of all, the technique that we utilize to calculate the market value is important. In 2007, we utilized what we call the replacement cost approach, which is basically giving an estimate of the value using a replacement cost of a property today, less depreciation. So basically what you're doing is using current cost of construction to build that same property today, less depreciation, and adding to that the value of the land. Now, we utilize what we call an algorithm or a formula to derive such value. What goes into that algorithm is, of course, the following: the size of the building, the price per square foot based on material, the condition of the property, the age of the property, all those are factors that go into the calculation of the value. So you multiply all those and you're deriving a value for that specific property. When it comes to the application of the rate, it depends. Each rate is different. So for example, residential, if I had to calculate the tax paid on a residential property, I would first have to deduct a residential exemption granted by cabinet of 80,000 for each residential building. And then I would multiply that taxable value by 0.2% to derive the value or the tax payable on that residential property. When it comes to commercial and accommodation, because it is thought that these are revenue generating properties.
And when you say accommodation, you're talking like hotels?
Yes. So accommodation and commercial, they are revenue generating properties, so the rate is a little higher and they do not get an exemption. The rate is 0.3%. So whatever the total value is, that is the value of the land and the value of the building, you multiply that by 0.3% and you get the tax payable for that owner or company of that property that is deemed to be commercial or accommodation.
It's a tricky question and you may not have an answer for this, but in the age of Airbnbs, persons are using their homes, their residential homes, to accommodate guests. How does that factor in, or are we not there yet?
Well, we have started a project of collecting properties that are used for Airbnb. However, those same properties, because they're deemed to be residential property, the predominant use is residential property, then they're deemed to be residential, and the commercial part of it is not necessarily taken into consideration because the predominant use of that is residential. But we are collecting information as we go out as to who's using their property for Airbnb for other purposes.
You also mentioned, of course, depreciation. You mentioned that's taken into account. Land does not depreciate. That is something that we were told growing up.
Correct.
But the buildings on the land does.
Correct.
So you have to find a balance between the two.
Correct.
In terms of working out that formula.
So what we do, we have a formula to calculate the value of land. That is pretty simple. In most areas in St. Kitts, land is valued at $5 a square foot. And so you multiply the value of the land, the market value of 5, in most cases, because Frigate Bay is a little higher, by the size of the land to get the value, and then that value is multiplied by the tax rate of 0.2% to get the tax payable on the land. When it comes to the building, that's where the depreciation factor comes in. We have a depreciation schedule as to how much depreciation is granted to each property, of course based on the age of the property, and so we utilize that when we are calculating the value, and of course the result is a tax on that.
Are special considerations made for properties that are not for profit, say a health clinic, not necessarily one that is funded by government, which is a question that I actually would want to ask as well too. But before you answer that one, a private properties like a non-for-profit, a church, those type of properties, they're given special considerations when it comes to property tax.
Yes, they're given special consideration. However, those properties must be owned and used strictly for the purpose of non-profit or for church-like activities. So, for example, the church in itself, full exemption because we know people are worshiping there. The cemetery is also exempt from taxation, both taxation and valuation. And also the property that is owned by the church and used by a clergy for residential purposes, they are exempt from taxation and also valuation.
Do government buildings attract property tax?
No. As a matter of fact, government buildings and the buildings of statutory bodies are not taxable. They are not valued. We cannot value them, and we also cannot tax them. And also government schools and even private schools, once they're owned by or leased for the purpose of education, they are not to be taxed or valued by the Inland Revenue Department.
Perhaps you can give some information about the agricultural properties.
When it comes to agriculture, I think for the benefit of a growth in agriculture production, properties that are deemed, whether it's by the valuation officers at Inland Revenue or the Director of Agriculture, as being used for bona fide farming, then those properties attract a rate of 0%, as in they do not pay taxes. So if you have your chicken, you go eggs, or you do meat production when it comes to that, any animal of any sort, and the agriculture director says that this is used for agricultural purposes, and the Inland Revenue can, of course, basically can say that for a fact that this is used for agricultural purposes, then there's a rate of 0%. Now, if the person lives on the farm in a residential property, that portion is not considered exempt from taxes. We would basically take out the portion of land that house sits on that is used for residential, and we would tax it.
That's interesting. And a question that always pops up is how, if I were to go and to expand, as you touched on earlier, on my property, or to remove a building, demolish a building, or whatever aspect of it, how will that impact my property tax? And you hinted at it earlier. But I wanted to discuss it a bit more with some other factors. But before we do that, we're going to have to take a break because we're up against the clock right now. Stay with us, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
What if your child's journey to wealth could begin with a single step? Through Aspire, every young citizen aged 5 to 18 receives 1,000 EC dollars, half in savings, half invested in their future. Financial education for life. Sign up today. Give your child a future of financial freedom. Don't wait for wealth to knock. Create it with Aspire.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
What if your child's journey to wealth could begin with a single step? Through Aspire, every young citizen aged 5 to 18 receives 1,000 EC dollars, half in savings, half invested in their future. Financial education for life. Sign up today. Give your child a future of financial freedom. Don't wait for wealth to knock. Create it with Aspire.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Thanks for staying with us. We continue our discussion with officials from the Inland Revenue Department, Assistant Comptroller, Mrs. Liza Mills, and Mr. Norman Rollins, who is the Chief Valuation Officer at Inland Revenue. As we touched on earlier, properties, their value can increase and decrease based on additions that are made and subtractions that are made as well. To mention that persons, because they can demolish their properties or whatever. How is the department informed of changes? Is it left strictly up to the public to say, hey, I changed my property?
Okay, well, the public has a right to inform the department, as to any changes that are made to
Do
the
they have
property.
a right or responsibility?
A responsibility,
Okay.
sorry, a responsibility to inform the department of any changes, additions, or alterations to their property. Now, in the past, we have relied heavily on doing field visits to determine if there are new properties in the area or if people would have expanded the property. But what we have done as of probably like 10 years now is that we have received a list of properties that have, or plans that have been approved by physical planning as an indication that there is intention to build, and also the field report from the inspectors to basically say what is the status of the property. In addition to that, we have received as of recent a list of all the persons who would have applied for duty-free concession through the Ministry of Finance, which we intend to use in our field visits to basically capture some of those properties that were once not captured.
Those interagencies collaborations are very important, because if I know I'm going to self-report myself and I'm going to be attracting a higher charge, there's some persons who may say, well, I'm not going to do that. Why would I want to be paying in a revenue to any higher revenue as opposed to what is owed to them? And so that's very important that you don't necessarily rely on individuals to do that. But here's a question though. If I am one who has a piece of land and I'm building on it, the structure doesn't necessarily have to be a house. It's not complete. How does that affect my property tax?
No, if the house is not complete or habitable, then you do not pay tax on the building, provided that that building is used, of course, for residential purposes. So you do not pay property taxes on uninhabitable or unfinished property to the extent that it cannot be lived in comfortably.
And that's where the field officers come in to give their
Correct.
assessment of that. Right. Okay, that's very important there. How are individuals informed about the value of the property tax?
Well, from the inception of the revaluation exercise in 2007, we sent out what we call certificate of valuation or certificate of value notices. Now, these notices inform you of what the value of the property is, both the land and the building. After that was done in 2007, the department combined both the valuation notice and the tax bill and send one every year. So while you may not get a document that says certificate of value, the demand notice serves as both a tax bill and a certificate of valuation.
That valuation, does it factor into transactions by real estate companies? Because if I'm selling my house or my property, then how would I be able to determine what to sell it at? If say my property is valued at $150,000 and I'm hoping out for $200,000, can the client, the prospective client, go and seek an evaluation from Inland Revenue to get a better sense of what a property costs in order to make an informed decision?
Well, the department does not provide valuation expertise to clients. The value that is installed on the demand notice is a value that was established in 2007, and it is outdated and archaic. So it's not a value that is used in property transaction, and that is clearly stated on the demand notice. Now, if you require the expertise of a valuer, you're expected to go to a private one to get such. What the department does, once the sale comes to the office or the transfer, we ascertain whether that value is market value. And so that's our job, to ensure that the government collect its rightful stamp duty on sale or transfer transactions.
So if I decide to sell a family member a property for below market costs, based on what you're saying that the tax may be higher because it's below what the market says the property is valued.
Correct. Because we do know if you're selling it to a family member, you're going to sell it below what is the market value. So the government doesn't want to lose out on that. And so we calculate the market value using today's values, of course, for that property. And if our value is higher than what you sell it for, then you'll be expected to pay 10% of our value to the government.
So fair and equitable applies both not only for clients, but also for the government as well.
Correct.
Interesting. All right, let me come back to something that you also mentioned as well. You said that it's old and archaic in terms of the valuation based on 2007 you mentioned.
Yes.
Are there plans to update that?
Well, there has been discussions over the years about changing or improving the values to reflect today's market. Now, that would be, of course, very beneficial to the government and also beneficial to the taxpayer, because they would have a sense of what their property is worth, which is what you spoke about just now. It gives you a benchmark, an idea of what your property is worth right now.
Okay, can a person appeal or challenge the valuation that is set by Inland Revenue?
Of course,
How
they can
can they?
appeal it. You're expected to fill out an objection form. First part of the process, is to complete that form and to submit it to us. We have 45 days to resolve that issue. If the issue cannot be resolved to the satisfaction of the taxpayer, then that taxpayer, of course, can make an appeal to the review board for them to hear the matter related to an objection.
And what would you say are some of the misconceptions that taxpayers have about property tax assessment?
What I would say is that there are lots of misconceptions out there about why they should be paying the tax. Why are they taxed for something that they own outright? Those are things that you hear more often when you go on the radio or in the media as to why this should be paid when I own it. This is my personal home. This is my sanctuary. Why are you taxing it? That's something we hear ever so often, and our response always is that you are the legal owner of the property. The bank is not the legal owner. The bank's name doesn't appear on the title as the legal proprietor or owner. You receive the services, you want to make an investment into your country, so you're expected to remit the property taxes to the government of St. Kitts and Nevis.
So that leads to a very interesting question. I'm not sure if you're able to share it, but how would you describe the compliance levels currently? Do persons come willingly forward and pay their taxes as it relates to property tax?
In every country, I think that it's inherent in our human nature. There are persons who would voluntarily comply. There are persons who would need encouragement, hence why the law incorporates some penalties and some enforcement action for those ones who would not readily pay their taxes on time. Such is the case in St. Kitts. We have persons who voluntarily comply, and I want to, at this point in time, thank all those taxpayers who continually contribute and pay their tax obligation as far as property tax is concerned every year, and this year is no exception. This year we're encouraging all our taxpayers to pay their property tax. Now, they may do so via several means, of course. We have quick pay, of course. Quick pay facilitates the payment where the taxpayer to go to our website and just type in www.skniid.com. That's our website, and then just keep quick pay, and then they are able to put in their property ID and pay easily.
And with quick pay, you don't have to register. You don't have to have an account there.
No,
you can just go on and just do it.
Right. So individuals need not necessarily have an account. Persons can, and we're encouraging individuals, in light of the fact that Inland Revenue is transitioning to a new system. Those persons who would have paid already, we are still encouraging those persons who would have normally paid and have not paid as yet to use our quick pay services. All right. So that's one means whereby we're encouraging individuals to pay their property tax.
And what are the other ways?
Of course, individuals can feel free to come into the Inland Revenue Department. That's one way. We're open, we accept cash or legal tender. By the way, we do not refuse any funds. And we also have SMARTS. Persons can register on the SMARTS platform and pay there, as well as pay via the National Bank's payment portal, and also via I think those are the main means. National Bank's payment portal, SMARTS, quick pay in particular, we're encouraging individuals, if you have not paid and you recognize that persons, you have not paid as yet, you can come into the department, pay as you would have normally, use your property tax information from that you would have received on your 2025 demand notice and come. Persons at this point in time, we're encouraging individuals as well to come to the department. If you have not received your demand notice as yet, come to the department. We'll be more than happy to allow persons to do that. But what is important to us, there are lots, as you asked the question in relation to compliance, there are quite a few persons who have or struggle with paying. That's a fact. There are quite a few persons, and when I would have attended some town hall meetings recently, one person would have said to me, you know, Eliza, even my next door neighbor, I know for a fact that that particular person is not paying. So there is an appeal from the department to encourage individuals, owners, to see the relevance of paying their property tax, because St. Kitts is fortunate in light of the fact that we do not have a personal income tax. But the property tax is one means whereby individuals over a large, you know, because we have quite a number of persons who own property, I think it's our largest taxpayer base. These individuals can contribute to nation building. And so the appeal really is to, you do not have, as Mr. Rawlings would have said before, you do not have to wait until the end, which is June 30th, but you can come in and make a payment arrangement. We have collection officers who are positioned to look at your situation. And so we're not saying to you, okay, we want you to pay X and Z. We look at the individual's ability to pay. And the onus is on the taxpayer, we're saying, to, you know, tell us your financial position, so that we can better serve you. So Inland Revenue, despite the fact that the law says pay, there are measures that are put in place that will allow individuals to pay based on their means, notwithstanding the fact that there is a value.
Penalties for persons who don't pay and are compliant?
For persons who need a little encouragement, of course, there's a late payment penalty of 10%. Interest accrues every month at a rate of 1%. So imagine if I do not pay this year, 1% goes on in January, 1% goes on in February, 1% goes on in, so it accumulates over time.
Let's use the numbers that random number that Mr. Rollins threw out. Let's say $1,000. That's $100, 10%. $100 is 10%.
Yes.
So it goes, it adds up over time. Now, there have been instances that persons want to sell their property, and they would not have paid or would have been careless in relation to their property tax obligation. They come to the Inland Revenue, and despite the reminders that Inland Revenue send, the reminder notices, the appeals that come to the various collection officers, they sometimes still expect that Inland Revenue will be lenient and not collect the tax. All right, so this, we're saying, if you do that, you are not contributing to nation building. And it means that, you know, something else would have to be sacrificed. And so, again, the appeal is all property owners use the means that are available. Inland Revenue, since its mass introduction, has employed several means to get in touch with our taxpayers. So we now contact taxpayers via email, which is something that we would not have done before en masse. We remind individuals of the upcoming notices, as well as we are positioning ourselves to say, regardless of what time of day it is, you can reach out to the Inland Revenue Department, because apart from our physical presence during the 8 to 4 period, we do have a tax assistant, and that tax assistant is called Keisha, is a chatbot. So you can go to Inland Revenue's website, type www.skniid and interact with Keisha should you need any information in relation to property tax or any other tax type.
I want to touch on the smarts in just a bit, but there's something that I wanted to ask in terms of the trends. What trends are we seeing in terms of payments to Inland Revenue and the compliance as it relates to property taxes? Are persons becoming more compliant? Because, of course, you would see that the economy, as it expands, that there are additional buildings that go down. So have we seen increases in terms of persons being compliant? Even though the numbers are going up, is it going the other way? What are the trends?
As far as Inland Revenue is concerned, I don't think I can speak intelligently at this point in time in terms of our numbers, right? But what we have seen, or what we know to be true, is that there are persons who remain non-compliant. And Inland Revenue, because of our responsibility to reach out and to try and encourage them to voluntarily comply, we continue to do so, right? The property tax, however, has been one of the greatest revenue generators of income revenue for our country. And this year in particular, the revenue target is 22.87 million. And so we recognize that citizens can, and they're encouraged to, right, pay their property tax because of the fact, not simply because it's a legal obligation, as we have said before, but we are helping to contribute to our nation. All the facilities that we so readily enjoy. We enjoy the roads, we enjoy the infrastructure, we boast about St. Kitts being a wonderful place to be. And of course, when our regional counterparts or come to St. Kitts, we say, well, they enjoy St. Kitts, all right? And we are in a privileged position because not only are we serving our populace here, but the product, there is benefit because individuals, we have a tourism product that is second to none. I have not heard in any conversation, and especially as it relates to our social, as St. Kitts become more, the product is advertised and marketed, you recognize that St. Kitts is a premier destination, and that is primarily because of the contributions, the individual contributions that our property owners and other tax revenue owners, they lend to the pot. Right. All right,
let me follow up on something you said.
Yes.
You said the target is 22.8 million. Is that higher or lower than last year? And what influences that target goal?
It is slightly higher than last year.
Which was, do you remember the number? If you don't have the number,
yes,
don't guess.
No,
all right,
no.
But it's higher.
Yes, it's higher than last year. And of course, I cannot speak to what would influence the increased target intelligently. However, what I do know is that Inland Revenue we are expecting to collect, or via our education programs, to collect revenues from those persons who have not paid. And so for the first time, we are sending emails, we are encouraging individuals on a monthly basis, so much so that individuals are saying, but these emails are coming, regularly. And our collection officers are actively working to ensure that, everybody make their fair and equitable contribution to nation building. And so we are actively working to ensure that revenue is collected from all persons concerned. those that regularly pay, and those that do not.
Okay. Mr. Rollins, just a quick question, something that occurred to me as we were having the discussion. Beach bars, they don't own the land, so the tax is charged on the property alone?
Yes, but in relation to, if you're speaking about Frigate Bay, those properties are not registered yet. We are looking into the possibility, the actuality if they should be taxed. That's something we're looking at this point in time.
Because someone may argue, why is Frigate Bay excluded? Why not South Friars Bay?
No, I mean, and the thing is even though you may not own the land, if you have a lease, and in that lease agreement you're expected to remit the taxes, then you'll be taxed as if you're the owner of that parcel. So as we speak, we're in the process of looking at those, and we will make a determination on those.
All right. We're going to take our final break. We're up against the clock with just about 10 minutes left. But I want to get this added because we're going to show a video of some of the taxes that you mentioned that can be paid online. So we're going to take that break right now. Stay with us, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Thanks for staying with us, and we are preparing to wrap up our conversation with officials from the Inland Revenue Department. We spoke a lot about property tax, and now we're going to move about how can you pay your taxes other than having to go in. Most persons are doing business online. Certainly that is something that the government is encouraging, and there is something called the SMARTS system. Ms. Mills, tell us about SMARTS.
SMARTS, as the acronym is on the platform on which Inland Revenue administers its taxation. Inland Revenue administers its taxes using this platform. It stands for Sustainable Modernized Administration Tax Revenue System, right? It was first introduced in March of 2024, and we have seen that individuals who have begun to use, who have registered for SMARTS, have begun to realize the benefits of doing so. One of the benefits of doing so is that they can see their entire account. They no longer have several tins, so the taxes are administered using one tin. So previously what used to happen
TIN, that would be tax
identification number.
Right.
So SMARTS allow all taxpayers to have one tax identification number. So as a business person, I would have had properties, and those properties previously had a different TIN. What SMARTS allow the individuals to do now, and for us to see, is to have one tax identification number so we can seamlessly manage the taxpayer experience with Inland Revenue. Not only that, Mr. Rollins spoke to being able to do objections. SMART allows for the taxpayers, regardless of what time of day it is, to log on to the platform, and if they so choose to do an objection, it will allow them to do an objection and send it to the Inland Revenue Department via that means. SMARTS, I dare say, is safe as a result of the fact that it has a two-factor authentication process, right? Now, What I would like to encourage the populace to do is not to share their login credentials with anyone, because any system becomes weak if the individual using it is not responsible. Inland Revenue has also placed some safeguards in place to ensure that it cannot be easily hacked, and so we have done all the work based on what our mandate is to ensure that the information is kept safe. And so right away as well, taxpayers generally, sometimes in the past we would have had requests for proof of address. One benefit is that the taxpayers can now go on and use information readily available, official documents readily available in SMARTS to provide that proof of address rather other than coming to the Inland Revenue Department.
So that you can use that to service a bank or whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's interesting. How many persons, well, it's again a general question that you may not be able to answer, but how many persons are taxpayers in this country, and how many of them are, what percentage would you say are registered for SMARTS?
What I would like to say to that is, I will generalize. Since the inception of SMARTS, our taxpayers have been encouraged to file online, all right? And we started with our business taxpayers. And what we have seen is that they have begun to file online regularly, and they're enjoying the experience. All right, so most of our taxpayers that are non-property owners have now registered on SMARTS. Now, with respect to property owners, however, this year is the first year, as a matter of this, in June, in the month of June, this is the first time we are actively administering property tax via the SMARTS. And so this is what we started with, issuing the demand notice via SMARTS. Inland Revenue will roll out other aspects of the program, but this is where we are at the moment. And so persons, once registered for SMARTS, could go in and see their demand notice. What we are encouraging individuals again to do, if you have not yet received your 2026 demand notice, you are encouraged to come to the Inland Revenue Department, register for SMARTS, and you can do so by logging on to our website.
Let me just stop it. There's a graphic that we have that right that we can have.
Okay, wonderful.
Right, go ahead. You can go
so
ahead.
You can register for SMARTS by going on to www.skniid.com. Click SMARTS, then you proceed to log in. All right. Then you click create an account. All right, for first-time users. Now, everybody who has not had an account prior to 2024, where you must go in as a first-time user. Then you enter your email address, and then your password. As the steps would have indicated, and persons are seeing them on the screen, these are the steps that you should take if you are registering your property. Now, equally important, this step allows individuals the access to the My Government portal, because My Government portal is just a gateway, right? To get to your Inland Revenue account, there are some additional steps where individual has to activate their account. Right?
We have that graphic as well to activate.
Right. Right. So individuals are expected to activate their account first by securing the information from Inland Revenue, the authorized activation code, and then the system is quite user-friendly. It prompts you to go through each and every step. Notwithstanding this information that you're seeing on screen, we have also Keisha, which is the chatbot,
right,
who could also guide you in the absence of the instructions there.
Right.
As well as
just to add to what Ms. Mills would have said, the last time we checked the property tax roll, it was over 26,000. That doesn't mean that there are 26,000 properties. It means that there are 26,000 tax obligations. So there are 26,000. You expect 26,000 demand notices to go out and so forth. And I say not 26,000 properties, because timeshare, each owner of a timeshare is taxed, but it's one property, but they own it for a specific period of time. So we have over 26,000 property tax obligation or demand notices that are sent out.
Unfortunately, we're out of time for the program. I would just ask one final question in terms of smarts. Is it in Nevis yet? And if not, when will it be introduced? Do you have a timeline?
Smarts, as we operate one Inland Revenue Department. We are federal, so Smarts, of course, was rolled out in Nevis the same time. So all the other tax types, with the exception of the property tax, has been rolled out. Right. Now, Nevis has taken a decision to, because they are undergoing some other program as well. I think they're doing a mass valuation. They're doing the revaluation exercise. And so a decision has been taken to delay the introduction of the requirement for taxpayers to pay via Smarts. But yes, we know that there's a tentative schedule, but Nevis will communicate when it's time. We'll have to leave it right there. We're out of time. Eliza Mills, Assistant Comptroller of Inland Revenue, Northern Rollins, who is the Chief Valuation Officer. Thank you so much for being with us for this edition of InFocus. Thanks. We'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us for this edition. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place at the same time for another discussion. We'll be joined by the Deputy Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and she'll be speaking about the 50th anniversary of the PEG. What is the PEG? Go and look that up, or join us next week. Until then, I'm Ian Richards. Remember, at InFocus, we discuss your government, your business.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio, and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.